"You've got to be kidding me," I muttered, staring at the photo on Adam's phone. The teenage girl's sullen expression and dark makeup were unmistakable. It was Jenna, one of my most challenging tutoring students this year. Adam sighed deeply. "That's my daughter, Amelia. She'll be coming to live with us next week." My heart pounded as realization set in. Amelia was the daughter he had briefly mentioned from a youthful fling before we met. But to have her show up now, after 16 years? This troubled girl was going to be under our roof? "Why the sudden change?" I asked carefully, my mind spinning. Adam rarely spoke of his past indiscretions. He shrugged. "Her mother's being deployed overseas for work. Amelia didn't want to move, so she'll stay with us." I studied his impassive expression, suspecting he wasn't being fully truthful. Still, this was a bombshell, a secret daughter upending our peaceful life together. Over the next few days, I watched Adam transform our guest room into a teenage girl's bedroom, painting the walls purple and setting up a desk for studying. I wondered if he was trying to atone for his past negligence as a father. When Amelia, or Jenna as I knew her, arrived, it was even more bizarre seeing her defiant sneer in our hallway. In my tutoring sessions, she had been constantly disruptive, with a concerning lack of effort. "Hey," she muttered flatly as Adam introduced us. I could already sense the challenges ahead with such a problematic houseguest. That first night, I overheard Amelia on a call in her room. "This place is a prison, Mom. I don't know how long I can keep up this stupid act." My stomach dropped. I had suspected Jenna came from a troubled home, but could she and her mother be putting on an elaborate con? Using Adam's own guilt against him for their gain? I knew I would have to tread very carefully. Over the next few weeks, Amelia's presence became increasingly disruptive. Her rude comments and blatant disregard for our household rules quickly frayed my nerves. Adam, however, seemed oblivious, or perhaps unwilling to address her behavior. "She's just a teenager finding her way," he'd say with a dismissive wave whenever I brought up her latest transgression. "Give her some space." Space? The girl was slowly taking over our home like an ill-mannered squatter. Her rooms were constantly trashed. She'd leave messes everywhere, and I'd catch her sneaking out at night multiple times. "Amelia, we need to talk about your actions," I stated firmly one morning after discovering she had stolen my good bottle of bourbon. "This cannot continue." She rolled her eyes defiantly. "Yeah, whatever. You're not my real mom." "Maybe not, but I deserve basic respect in this house," I shot back, my temper flaring. "Your father works hard to give you a home here." "Oh, Daddy works so hard, does he?" she sneered. "For whose benefit, I wonder?" The insinuation hung heavy in the air. I opened my mouth to retort, but Adam stepped between us. "That's enough, both of you. Amelia, go to your room." As she stormed off, I turned to Adam incredulously. "You're actually taking her side? After that attitude?" He avoided my gaze. "She's just a kid, Claire. Lashing out is normal for her age. So her blatant disrespect is okay? You're making excuses." We argued heatedly until I finally gave up, retreating to the bedroom in fuming silence. This was not the life I had envisioned when I married Adam. A few days later, I made a discovery that turned my world upside down. While using Adam's computer for work, I noticed his email was still logged in. Telling myself I shouldn't snoop, I started to close it, but a particular name in his inbox caught my eye. Jessica. My heart raced as I opened the email thread. The conversations dated back months before Amelia's arrival. Jessica was apparently her mother, and the emails detailed their plan for Amelia to move in and make herself at home with us. It was all a scheme, a ploy to insert their way into our lives, and judging by the frequent mentions of getting what's owed, likely for financial gain. I felt sick realizing Adam had been lying to me this entire time. Worse, Amelia, Jenna, was fully complicit. This was my own troubled student, now living under my roof to help fleece her own father. The deception made my head spin. I spent the next few days quietly observing Amelia's behaviors through new eyes. The sneaking out, the rudeness, it was all an act to aggravate Adam and destabilize our household. A long con that my husband had agreed to, for reasons I didn't yet understand. As much as it pained me, I knew I needed to play along for now and gather more evidence. To take them down, I needed to be 2 steps ahead in their own twisted game. Amelia's presence became increasingly unbearable after my discovery of the emails. Knowing she was actively conning us, her every action took on new insidious meaning. The smirks, the sass, the blatant disregard for our house rules, it was all choreographed to undermine Adam and destabilize our home life. "You left your crap all over the living room again," I stated coldly one evening as she sauntered in from another late night out. She shrugged, popping a piece of gum loudly. So, this is our home, not a flop house. Show some respect." "Respect?" She laughed mockingly. "That's rich coming from you." I bristled, fighting to keep my anger in check. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Like you even know the first thing about me or my life." "Maybe if you acted like a normal human being instead of a rude, entitled brat." "Hey!" Adam's voice cut me off as he entered. "What's going on here?" "Just dealing with your daughter's wonderful attitude as usual," I snapped. Amelia smirked. "Daddy's little princess has a problem following rules, I guess." "Don't start," I warned, but Adam raised his hands placatingly. Okay. Let's all just take a deep breath, all right?" I shook my head in disgust, storming off to the kitchen, as if his calm negotiations would stop this act they were putting on. The worst part? I couldn't even confide in Adam about my discoveries. He was clearly complicit in this scheme with Amelia's mother Jessica, revealing what I knew could spook them into accelerating their con. No, I needed to bide my time and continue gathering evidence to expose their plot, starting with finding out exactly what getting what's owed meant in those emails. Over the next few weeks, I scoured Adam's computer and files whenever he was away at work, searching for any paperwork or communications that could shed light on Jessica's motivation. What I found made my blood boil. Years ago, when Adam was briefly involved with Jessica, he had gotten her pregnant with Amelia. Instead of taking responsibility, he paid Jessica a lump sum of money to walk away and terminate the pregnancy. Except she hadn't. And now, years later, they were back to extract even more from him through this deception. I felt physically ill realizing the depths of Adam's past betrayal and how Amelia was being used as a pawn for her mother's revenge. This was no longer just a con. It was a vicious, calculated scheme to make my own husband miserable. When Adam returned home that evening, I could barely look at him. He must have sensed my anger because he pulled me aside with forced cheerfulness. "Hey, what's going on? You've seemed really tense lately." I met his gaze levelly. "Have I? Gee, I wonder why that could be, with your lying, conniving daughter making our lives hell." His expression faltered. "Claire, I know she's been difficult, but she's my child. Your child that you once wanted terminated," I hissed, no longer caring about playing dumb. "That's what this is really about, isn't it? Jessica's revenge for you trying to make Amelia disappear." Adam's face drained of color. For a long moment he could only sputter uselessly. I shook my head in disgust. "I can't even look at you right now." Turning, I headed upstairs, my mind racing with the next steps. With Adam's secret out in the open, there was no more holding back. It was time to dismantle this sick little family con once and for all, by whatever means necessary. With Adam's past deception now exposed, the tension in our household was thick enough to cut with a knife. Amelia continued her calculated misbehavior, no doubt trying to further destabilize our home on her mother's behalf. I, however, was done playing their game. If Adam was too cowardly or complicit to put a stop to this, I would take matters into my own hands. "We need to talk," I stated firmly, cornering Amelia in the kitchen one morning before she could slink back to her room. She rolled her eyes. "About what?" "About you and your mother's little scheme to extort money from my husband." Her bravado faltered for just a moment before the sneer returned. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't play dumb. I know all about the emails between your mom and Adam, plotting for you to move in and make yourself at home here." I stepped closer, keeping my voice low and menacing. "Using his own daughter as a pawn to get what's owed? That's low, even for him." Panic flickered across her face before the mask of indifference returned. "You're crazy, lady. I'm just living here, that's all. After he paid your mother to have you terminated as a pregnancy?" That struck a nerve. Amelia's fists clenched, her eyes burning with hatred I hadn't seen before. "That's a lie. My mom wouldn't." "Wake up," I snapped, feeling perverse satisfaction at her shock. "Your mom's just using you as a tool for payback over Adam's past choices. This is all one big con." Amelia opened her mouth to respond, but a new voice cut through the tension. "That's enough." Adam stood in the doorway, fury etched across his features as he pulled Amelia protectively behind him. "You've gone too far, Claire. Making up lies to turn my own daughter against me?" I laughed derisively. "That's rich, coming from you. I have the emails, Adam. All the proof of your pathetic deal with Jessica to make Amelia disappear years ago. That's what this has all been about, her revenge, using your own flesh and blood." For once, Adam seemed at a loss for excuses or placating words. Amelia stared between us, her expression unreadable. "Well," I pressed, "aren't you going to admit to your lies, your betrayal of me, of your own family?" Adam's jaw tightened, and I wondered if he might finally come clean. If this would be the moment where, "Get out!" The quiet venom in his voice stopped me cold. "What?" "You heard me," he stated, wrapping an arm around Amelia. "After the cruel, vindictive lies you've spewed, I want you out of this house, tonight." My heart dropped to my stomach as the words hit like a physical blow. "Adam, you can't be serious. This is my home, too." "Not anymore," he said with chilling finality. "Not after you've made it so toxic with your deranged accusations against my daughter." I opened my mouth, but no words came out. He was choosing them, the ones deceiving and manipulating him, over his own wife. Tears stung my eyes as I looked between their impassive faces. In that moment, I felt more alone than I ever had before. Swallowing hard, I met Adam's gaze with as much dignity as I could muster. You'll see the truth soon enough, and when you do—" I shook my head slowly. "Well, don't come crawling back to me." Turning, I headed upstairs to pack what few belongings I could quickly gather. My home, my life, was crumbling around me, but I wouldn't go down without a fight. If Adam was too blinded by familial bonds to see the truth, I would make him open his eyes. Whatever it took, I would expose this twisted scheme and make them pay. The real battle was only just beginning. After Adam kicked me out, I spent a few aimless weeks crashing with friends, my mind spinning over how to expose Jessica and Amelia's twisted scheme. I couldn't simply walk away, not with that vile mother using her own daughter as a pawn against my husband. Eventually, I settled into a small rental apartment, using what little savings I had to get by. More importantly, it gave me a base to operate my counterattack and gather indisputable proof of their con. My first move was to make copies of the damning emails between Adam and Jessica that I had discovered. I also began meticulously documenting every instance of Amelia's calculated misbehavior at home to build a case against her. Next, I hired a private investigator to start digging into Jessica's background. Within weeks, they uncovered a trail of shady activities, unpaid loans, evictions, and a string of wealthy ex-boyfriends she had burned. This was clearly a long pattern of deception on her part. Armed with this new evidence, I requested a sit-down with Adam at a neutral location, a coffee shop near his office. He arrived looking haggard and defensive. "What is this about, Claire? I have nothing left to say to you after your unforgivable behavior." I slid the thick manila envelope across the table. "This is about the truth, the whole truth about your lies, and the con your ex and daughter have been pulling on you." Adam hesitated before flipping open the envelope, his brow furrowing as he thumbed through the documents inside. The email transcripts, the PI's report on Jessica, my logs of Amelia's troublemaking. As the weight of the evidence became undeniable, I could see the conflict playing across his face. Part of him still wanted to cling to deluded denial, but the proof was far too compelling. You went this far?" he finally said, seemingly unsure whether to be awed or outraged. I leaned forward intently. "I had to, Adam. After the way you turned on me and kicked me out over their lies, you left me no choice but to take this into my own hands." Shame flickered across his features, but he remained defensive. "Even if some of this is true, Amelia is still my blood. You don't understand how important that is." I shook my head sadly. "You're right, I don't, because you never gave me the chance to understand by being honest with me from the start." My voice had risen, drawing glances from nearby tables. I took a breath to rein in my anger. "Look at the evidence, Adam. Look at what kind of person Jessica really is, using your own child to try to fleece you. Where does her manipulation end? How much further will she go?" He didn't respond, his jaw tensing as he avoided my stare. For a long moment, an uncomfortable silence stretched between us. Finally, he spoke in a hoarse murmur. "You're right. I should have been upfront with you about Amelia from the beginning. I didn't. I didn't want to risk losing you over my past mistakes." "Well, you did lose me," I stated flatly. "The question now is, are you going to continue letting them use and manipulate you? Or are you finally going to stand up and be a man?" Adam's shoulders slumped, all the fight seeming to go out of him. He looked utterly defeated in that moment, a broken man slowly coming to grips with the reality he had avoided for too long. "I don't know," he muttered, staring down at the envelope's damning contents. "I just don't know anymore." Pushing back from the table, I stood to leave. He didn't try to stop me. "Think it over," I said quietly. "And remember, the truth won't go away, no matter how hard you try to ignore it." As I walked away, I felt a surprising sense of calm determination. For too long I had been on the defensive against Adam and his deceptive family, but now the battlefield was level. The weapons of truth and justice were finally on my side. It was time to go on the attack. Several tense weeks went by without a word from Adam after our confrontation. I tried not to get my hopes up that he was finally seeing the light about Jessica and Amelia's twisted scheme. He had been too deep in denial for too long. Then one evening my phone rang, Adam asking if we could meet again to talk. I agreed, bracing myself for whatever excuses or rationalization he might throw my way next. When we met at a quiet bar, however, Adam looked utterly despondent. Broken, even. "You were right," he stated flatly after we sat down. "About all of it. Jessica, Amelia, the lies, the manipulation. It was all one big con." Despite the vindication, I felt no joy or satisfaction as I studied his haggard expression. "How did you finally realize?" I asked quietly. Adam dragged a hand down his face, suddenly looking decades older. "After you showed me all that evidence, I couldn't keep deluding myself anymore. I started digging deeper into Jessica's past like you did, and—" He shook his head slowly. "Let's just say she has a pattern of using men to bankroll her lifestyle, then discarding them once she's bled them dry." "So you were just the next target for her and Amelia to sink their claws into," I murmured. "Exactly. And I was the perfect mark, a successful businessman with assets, blinded by my own guilt and desire to play father to the daughter I abandoned." A rueful, self-loathing laugh escaped his lips. "She played me like a damn fiddle from the start." "And Amelia?" I pressed. "What did she have to say when you confronted her about the truth?" A flicker of anguish passed over Adam's features. "At first she denied it, calling me crazy and paranoid like they had you, but once I showed her ironclad proof of her mother's patterns, she just went cold and silent." He slowly shook his head. "My own daughter? Conspiring with her mother to take me for everything I have. All these years, she never gave a damn about having me in her life. I was just a mean to an end for their sick game." Despite everything, I felt a pang of sadness seeing the dejected man before me, forced to confront such an ugly truth about his own flesh and blood. "I'm so sorry, Adam," I said quietly. "As much as they hurt and betrayed me too, I can't imagine the pain of having your own child turned so monstrous." A hollow laugh escaped his lips. "Well, we reap what we sow, don't we? This is the price for the lies and cowardice in my past, running away from problems instead of facing them." I didn't disagree. Adam's refusal to take responsibility for his past mistakes had opened the door for Jessica to slither back into our lives with her poisonous agenda. "So what now?" I asked carefully. "What are you going to do about them?" Adam's jaw tightened, a flash of the strong man I'd married briefly returning to his eyes. "The only thing I can do. Cut them off for good, once and for all. No more money, no more enabling their sick need for revenge." He looked up at me intently. "And I want— No, I need your help, Claire. You're the only one who had my back through this nightmare, even when I was too blind to see it." I considered for a moment, part of me still stung by the cruel way he had turned on me in siding with Jessica and Amelia before. But seeing this broken man, reaching for a last shred of redemption, I knew I couldn't turn away. Slowly, I reached across the table and grasped his hand, squeezing it firmly. "You've got it. We'll take them down together, for good this time. No more lies, no more running. It's time they finally face the consequences." Adam's eyes glistened with a mixture of shame, relief, and renewed determination. He simply nodded. The reckoning was coming. and this time nothing would stop justice from being served. With Adam finally seeing the truth about Jessica and Amelia's twisted con, we wasted no time springing into action. First order of business, cutting off their access to his money and assets before they could bleed him dry. We met with Adam's lawyers and accountants, laying out the evidence I had gathered so they could erect a legal fortress protecting his finances. Bank accounts were frozen, investment portfolios locked, even his personal credit cards canceled. If those two vipers thought they were going to continue living off my husband's dime, they had another thing coming. Next, we moved to separate Amelia from her enabler mother's influence. Adam contacted Jessica, demanding she come to the house to collect her daughter's belongings immediately. When she arrived with Amelia in tow, I could practically see the dollar signs in their eyes. "What's going on, Adam?" Jessica simpered, all fake concern. "Why are you kicking my baby out?" "Can it?" I snapped before Adam could respond. "We know all about your little scheme to fleece him using Amelia. The con is over." Jessica's sugary facade quickly melted into a sneer. "You've got no proof of anything, just more of your deranged ramblings, Claire." Smirking, I tossed a thick manila envelope at her feet, the contents spilling out, copies of emails, financial records, the PI's report laying out her patterns of deceit. "Oh, I've got proof all right. Reams of it." Her eyes widened as she scrambled to scoop up the papers, realization dawning. She turned to Amelia desperately. "Baby, this crazy bye. Don't talk to her." Adam's voice boomed. "Surprising us all, you've both done enough here. More than enough." For once, Amelia seemed cowed by her father's intensity, shrinking back slightly. Jessica, however, rallied in defiant anger. "You're making a big mistake, Adam, after everything I've done for you, letting you be part of Amelia's life." "Letting me?" Adam shook his head in disgust. "Using her as a pawn to try to fleece me over past mistakes? That's not any kind of favor. It's reprehensible, and it stops now." You can't do this," Jessica sputtered, panic creeping in as she realized her con was crumbling. "We're family." "No," Adam stated with chilling finality. "You're not my family anymore. Just another mistake to finally put in the past." Jessica opened her mouth to respond, but seemed to think better of it, shooting me a look of pure venom before storming out the door, Amelia slinking behind her. As the door slammed, I let out a long breath, adrenaline still coursing through me from the confrontation. Adam simply stood motionless, his expression unreadable. "Well, they're out of our lives for good now," I ventured carefully. "You did the right thing, Adam." He gave a slow nod, still seeming lost in thought. "Maybe. Maybe not. All I know is I can't let that toxicity continue poisoning everything I hold dear." I studied him for a long moment before speaking again. "For what it's worth, I'm proud of you for facing this head-on. Not many men would have had the strength." Adam's gaze finally met mine, stripped of the bravado and denial that had blinded him for so long. I only wish I had that strength sooner, before it all spiraled so far out of control. We stood in silence for a long stretch, the weight of the situation, of all the hurt and betrayal, hanging heavy between us. So much had been lost on the way to this point. Finally, Adam seemed to shake himself from his reverie. "Well, I suppose I should start putting my life back together. Try to salvage what I can." I gave him a sad smile. "For both our sakes, I hope you can." As I watched him turn and head upstairs, I felt an unexpected pang of melancholy. His entire world had been shattered upon the rocks of lies and deception. But in that wreckage, there was a chance to finally rebuild something stronger. Whether that new life would involve me, however, remained to be seen. For tonight, I simply felt a sense of relief that the worst was over. The con had failed, and sometimes just surviving is victory enough. In the aftermath of finally cutting Jessica and Amelia out of our lives for good, an uneasy truce settled over Adam and me. We were two wounded soldiers, battered from the same war, but still struggling to find common ground. He spent most of his days holed up in his home office, no doubt trying to salvage what was left of his career and finances after having to legally batten down the hatches. I could only imagine the professional embarrassment of having to admit he'd fallen victim to such an insidious family con. As for me, I drifted in the limbo of our guest room, unsure of what my next move should be. Part of me still loved Adam, still wanted to fight for the life we'd had before this nightmare descended, But could I ever truly trust him again after how thoroughly he had dismissed and turned on me? We rarely spoke beyond courteous nods in passing. The shadow of betrayal hung too heavy between us. Then one evening, a heated argument from Adam's office caught my ear. Voices raised in anger, his, but also an unmistakable snide female tone. I crept down the hallway toward the cracked door. "You think you've won?" It was Jessica, venom dripping from her words. "You arrogant son of a bitch, you haven't seen the last of this." "Get off my property before I call the police, you vindictive snake," Adam snarled. "You've already cost me everything." "Not everything, lover," she purred menacingly. "Not yet." There was a pause, then the unmistakable sound of a struggle. Objects clattering, Adam grunting in anger and exertion. I couldn't stop myself. I burst through the door to see them grappling, Jessica clutching a heavy paperweight as they tussled. "Adam!" I cried in horror, rushing forward to try and separate them. Suddenly, a searing pain lanced through my head as something struck me from behind. White lights exploded in my vision, and I crumpled dazedly to the floor, my world spinning. "Claire!" Adam's voice seemed to come from a vast distance. "Oh God, Claire!" Blearily, I could make out shapes moving, voices distorting in and out as unconsciousness threatened to claim me. A furious Adam snatching the paperweight from the floor, Jessica's mocking laughter as she backed away. "Who's the snake now, lover? Enjoy the sweet taste of my revenge." Then her voice faded, the only sound Adam's ragged breathing as he cradled me. I could feel warm stickiness spreading through my hair, each pulse of my heartbeat a spike of agony. "Stay with me, baby," Adam pleaded, voice thick. "Don't you dare leave me too." I wanted to respond, to reassure him, but the words stuck in my throat. Blackness crept in from the edges of my vision until everything faded to void. The next days, or was it weeks, passed in a drug-addled haze of pain and disjointed images. Hospital rooms, the acrid stench of antiseptic, murmurs of words like severe concussion and touch and go. When I finally reemerged into full consciousness, it was to find Adam slumped in a chair beside my bed, haggard and unshaven. He startled awake as I stirred, his eyes widening in relief. "Oh, thank God," he rasped, voice cracking with emotion as he grasped my hand. I thought I might lose you too." I struggled to blink the cobwebs from my mind, memories slowly coalescing. "Jessica," I murmured. "She was there?" Adam's jaw tightened with barely contained rage, her final parting shot before the authorities apprehended her. She and Amelia are both in custody now, facing a laundry list of charges. Despite my pounding head, I felt a sense of grim satisfaction. At long last, they would face real consequences for their depravity. "I'm so sorry, Claire," Adam went on hoarsely. "If I had just been upfront from the start about Amelia, about my past, none of this would have happened. You never would have gotten hurt because of my lies." I could only gaze at him for a long moment, taking in the broken man before me. Once so self-assured and confident, now brought low by the very secrets he thought could be buried. "You're right," I finally said, squeezing his hand. "This all could have been avoided if you'd just been honest with me." Tears welled in Adam's eyes as he held my stare. "I've lost everything that ever mattered because of my mistakes. My job, my reputation. I'll be lucky if I can rebuild anything from the ashes." Gently, I stroked the stubbled plane of his cheek. "Not everything," I murmured. "Not yet." Adam's eyes widened slightly, a glimmer of hope flickering to life in their depths. A fragile, tentative spark in the darkness, but a spark nonetheless. As I gazed at the man I'd once loved, I knew the road ahead would be long and arduous. Rebuilding trust, piecing together whatever could be salvaged from the wreckage of lies and deceit. But if that spark could catch, if we truly had the strength to overcome the betrayals, perhaps there was still a chance to rekindle what we had lost. The choice would be ours to make.